The ocean doesn't forget. It carries memory in its waves, even when men in suits try to erase it from maps. Far out in the Indian Ocean, in a place most people couldn't point to on a globe, lies Diego Garcia, a tropical atoll with palm trees swaying in warm breezes, coral reefs glittering beneath turquoise waters, and white sand beaches stretching into the horizon. To those who lived here for generations, it was home. To the world's great powers, it was something else entirely, a billion-dollar fortress hiding in paradise. The story begins not with soldiers or warplanes, but with fishermen. A small boat rocks gently off Diego Garcia's shore in the late 1960s. The men haul in nets as they've done since childhood, but today, their eyes are drawn to the smoke rising from the village dock. Families are gathered there, their possessions bundled in sheets and crates. Women clutch frightened children, men stand stiff, uncertain whether to fight or obey. Soldiers bark orders, moving with cold efficiency. Then come the dogs, beloved companions, guardians of the village. The soldiers drag them into cages, stack them on the sand, and with a single match, flames erupt. This island was no longer theirs. The people of Diego Garcia were herded onto rusting ships, told they'd return soon. They carried only what they could hold: pots, blankets, photographs, chickens, a few dogs that slipped through the roundups. The ship sailed not to another paradise, but to slums in Mauritius and the Seychelles. Families were left on docks with no money, no homes, and no explanation. Their island, they were told, was uninhabited. How can a place with thousands of people suddenly be uninhabited? The answer lies in the politics of empire, oil, and the Cold War. After World War II, the world was divided into spheres of influence. The United States sought to secure every ocean, every choke point, every runway that could project power. The Indian Ocean was a blind spot, vast, strategically critical, but with few bases. At the same time, Britain's empire was shrinking. Once the ruler of seas, London was desperate to hold on to scraps of influence while juggling debts. Out of this imbalance, a secret deal was born. In 1966, the United States and Britain struck an agreement. Britain would lease Diego Garcia and the surrounding Chagos archipelago to Washington for 50 years in exchange for a discount on American nuclear missiles. To make the deal palatable, Britain quietly declared the islands uninhabited. No people meant no problem. But there were people, roughly 2,000 of them, known as Chagossians, or Iloas. They traced their ancestry back centuries, descendants of enslaved Africans and indentured laborers brought by the French, later ruled by the British. Over generations, they built a Creole culture distinct from anywhere else in the world. They fished the lagoons, grew coconuts, raised families, and sang songs in a language blending French, Creole, and African rhythms. Their lives were simple, but rooted in the land and sea. The eviction began quietly. Supplies to the islands were cut. Chagossians traveling abroad for medical treatment or work were suddenly told they couldn't return. Ships stopped bringing basic goods. Rumors spread, but official explanations never came. Then in 1971, the hammer fell. British officials arrived with U.S. naval officers. The islanders were summoned, told they had to leave immediately. Many resisted, insisting their families had lived here for generations. Soldiers responded with shows of force, rounding up animals, killing them in front of their owners, setting homes ablaze. The people were forced onto cargo ships. The voyage was brutal. Families crammed into the holds with no beds, barely any food or water, seasick children vomiting as waves tossed the ship. Pregnant women gave birth on dirty decks. By the time they reached Mauritius or the Seychelles, many were broken in body and spirit. What awaited them was worse: poverty, discrimination, and neglect. They were dumped in slums, given no compensation, no housing, no jobs. Some slept on concrete floors of warehouses. A people who once lived in harmony with their island were suddenly treated as refugees. But refugees from a disaster that no one in the world acknowledged. Back on Diego Garcia, the transformation was swift. Coconut groves were bulldozed, villages erased, and an enormous airbase began to rise from the sand. A runway longer than the island itself was built, capable of hosting B-52 bombers. Port facilities expanded to harbor nuclear submarines. Surveillance equipment sprouted, tracking Soviet ships and satellites. Diego Garcia became the most important U.S. military base in the Indian Ocean, a launchpad for wars in the Middle East, a refueling hub for bombers in Afghanistan and Iraq, a listening post for global intelligence. Few Americans even knew the name, but in Washington's war rooms, Diego Garcia was indispensable. Meanwhile, the Chagossians fought to be heard. In Mauritius, they held protests outside government buildings, carrying signs that read, "We want to return home." They filed petitions, wrote letters, begged journalists to tell their story. For decades, their cries were ignored. The British government maintained the official fiction. The islands were uninhabited. The truth began to surface only after whistleblowers leaked documents. In one memo, a British official casually described the Chagossians as a few Tarzans or Men Fridays, primitive people who could be relocated without consequence. Another document outlined the plan in blunt terms. We must maintain the fiction that the islands have no permanent population. These papers revealed not just deception, but contempt. In exile, life for the Chagossians grew harder. Many sank into poverty. Alcoholism and depression spread. Suicide was common. For a people tied so deeply to their land, the loss was not just physical, but spiritual. Elders mourned not only their homes, but the graves of ancestors left behind. In their culture, spirits were bound to the land. Being torn from it was like being severed from their very identity. Legal battles stretched across decades. Chagossians sued Britain in its own courts, arguing their eviction was illegal. In 2000, they briefly won a stunning victory. The High Court ruled that their expulsion was unlawful and they had a right to return. Joy spread through the exiled community, but that joy was short-lived. The government quickly passed a royal prerogative order, effectively overruling the courts with a single stroke of executive power. Once again, the door was shut. Then came 2019. In a landmark ruling, the International Court of Justice declared Britain's control of the Chagos Islands unlawful and called for their return to Mauritius. The United Nations followed with a resolution demanding the same. It was one of the most resounding legal condemnations of colonial behavior in modern history. Yet Britain, backed by the United States, ignored it. The base remained. The Chagossians stayed in exile. The irony is brutal. Diego Garcia was taken in the name of freedom, security, and democracy, yet it required trampling the rights of an entire people. It became a symbol of imperial logic in the modern age.